Hi, I'm Noor. I guess I'm really honored to be on this panel with all these really awesome activists and learn so much here. And this conference was really well organized, so thanks for inviting me. I use feminine pronouns, she, her, hers. And mine, I obviously don't have as much experience as everybody at this table, so I'm just gonna give kind of a short background of how I started getting involved in activism and where that's led me and how much what I've learned throughout the years. So I guess I've been really touched by everyone talking here about community and defending your community and work and getting involved into activism as a response to issues in your community, and it's a necessity. And that just makes me think about how I got started. So my parents moved here from Pakistan in the 1980s, and I was born in Detroit. And around the age 7 or 8, my parents started moving out to the suburbs, and now they live in West Bloomfield, Michigan, which is one of those terrible suburbs. So I feel like I never really felt part of one community. I don't live in Detroit anymore. I grew up there for a few years, but I was a kid, it doesn't count. And then suburbs, that's not a community. I mean, there's nowhere to hang out, there's no public space, there's no one like you, everyone's really privileged. And then my father went to prison when I was a freshman in high school. So, sorry, okay, I'm just gonna get out of the way. And so I was a really angsty teen, to say the least. Getting into fights, getting into trouble a lot in school. And so my parents were just okay, you need to get involved in something, you need to put your energy into the right things. I know I'm crying, honestly. So that's when, okay, so I grew up still involved in the Detroit community in many ways. Hamtramck was a place where we would go get our food and get our clothes fixed because the Bangladeshi community is there and we're South Asian. Going to Detroit, we have a lot of family in Dearborn because a Middle Eastern community. Thank you. So when I was 15, my parents were you need to get involved in something, and I was in Eastern Market, and I was I want to work here. This looks sweet. So much diversity, so much culture, so much fun. Everyone's having a good time. There's music. They're selling vegetables. Food is cool. It's this is better than loitering and getting in trouble by the police. So I started getting involved with Earthworks Urban Farms and Kitchens, which is a Capuchin soup kitchen and urban farm in Detroit, and they sell at the Eastern Market. And throughout high school, I started spending a lot more time in Detroit, just doing that volunteering community service, very basic, 15, 16-year-old stuff, and interacting with people in the community of Detroit, pretending I was part of it, feeling good about being there, though I would go home to a privileged, mostly white neighborhood at night. So yeah, and then I interned for the Green Corps. This is back when Proposal 3 was on the ballot, and it was just this. I had to do a project in the community in high school, so they're go intern for the Sierra Club or the Green Corps or something. And Proposal 3 was on the ballot, which was Michigan's renewable energy portfolio standard, changing it from 10% renewable energy by 2015 to 20% renewable energy by 2020. So when I was that 17-year-old bright-eyed petition signer at the farmer's market, hey, do you have a minute for clean air? And people saying, fuck you, or no, I don't want clean air. Oh my God, why is nobody, what is the deal? I thought this was obvious, don't you want to breathe clean air? And so I would do this I would go to a Royal Oak farmer's market. So if y'all are familiar with Metro Detroit suburbs, Royal Oak is right across the border of Detroit, and Royal Oak and Ferndale right after there. It's mostly white, privileged, higher income suburbs. And then I would go to a Highland Park farmers market or more low income farmers market, and just seeing the differences in opinions at a young age was when I was oh, what's up? Why don't these people care about the environment? These people do. Why are these people being nice to me? These people aren't. The demographics were just so in my face. I was I need to understand what's going on here. It's how is this person who's living in the most polluted neighborhood saying that they don't want to pay higher taxes so that there's more renewable energy in the state. It's like, oh, they don't have economic security. They don't want to pay higher taxes because they can't. So that was really eye-opening for me at a really young age to kind of notice those differences and really try to understand why it existed. And then I realized, like, the system is set up to enforce and maintain these injustices. When all the decisions of land management are based on profit and structural racism as their motives, environmental injustices are destined to incur forever. So I think my focus since then has been to decrease dependence and focus on the moral and physical legitimacy of industrial capitalism and work towards really addressing these issues with a lens on building stronger, self-sufficient, and eventually autonomous communities for people of color and historically oppressed populations. So, we'll get to that more. So I would say, okay, I feel a lot better now, thank you for the support. Okay, just like what you were saying earlier, Melvin, like a place to channel those frustrations towards life and anger towards the state and industrial capitalism really helped. No longer getting in trouble by the police for stupid things as a teen, you know. This time it's for a cause. So I would say my environmental justice activism really focuses on 3 parts: direct radical action, education and curriculum, and movement and community building. So, okay, I'll start with, after those grueling conversations at the farmer's market, trying to get petitions signed, I realized that it wasn't enough, and I came to the University of Michigan. I was really lucky to get a lot of really good scholarships to come here. And joined a bunch of environmental groups thinking like, this is what I'm going to do in school, like I'm going to join these environmental groups, I'm going to make a change. This university has so much power and resource, like I can do all this stuff, and then quickly realized that after a few months in my freshman year that not only did none of those groups' demographics represent me at all, but none of them aligned with any of my political values, and it was like all about it was all about working within the decentralized decision-making process of the university, which is set up to stall and minimize student projects unless you put in all of the work, water it down to something that's palatable to them, and like provide them with like the entire report of like, this is an option, like we put in all the effort into like providing you all these ideas, like, do you want to do it maybe? And then they're like, maybe, yes or no. Otherwise, they'll just put you in a committee and stall you for 4 years. It's ridiculous. And then after like some stupid bake sales or something, I was like, all right, like these groups like are not doing anything. And so then I like dropped all of those environmental groups on campus, and I met Mary. And then I started slowly getting involved in finding out about more radical groups, not necessarily on campus, but in the community, like Michigan Coalition Against Tar Sands, Earth First, and other groups that recognize the larger systems of power and oppression and are not trying to just treat symptoms and like focus on this one little abstract wilderness idea, and are talking more about like these larger issues and how they're all connected, and there is a reason why it's happening, and those reasons are going to continue to happen, and we need to just fight structural oppression, structural racism, and economic injustice, and then we can, and that all in hand with environmental preservation. So working with those groups, I definitely like was able to align my frustration and my political ideologies with another group of people. But the thing that was always missing with those experiences, I started to notice was with these groups, they were sympathetic to the cause of environmental justice, but the largely white demographic is difficult to work with in the sense like you just, so everyone who's this radical, you just like assume everyone knows what privilege is, everyone knows what like racism is, like we don't need to talk about it, like they're down for the cause, like, but then you start realizing like, okay, all their actions are focusing on kind of like you're saying like parachute in, like let's stop this pipeline and get out, or like let's do these actions that support, like we come into a city or a state and like you do something radical, which is probably a cool thing, but it's so isolated in the larger struggles and campaigns of communities already working on the ground. It like doesn't really help anything except pat yourself on the back that I did this thing. So in those groups I was like, okay, I align with the political ideologies and like the tactics of the group, but I don't like where you're focusing your attention, and it's hard to be that one person of color that's like always put on the spot to be like, oh, they're like, oh, there's a non-white person in our group, like we are open-minded. We're not racist, like she gets to talk sometimes, you know? So then it was like all this weird identity stuff was like, should I even say anything? Like, do I like, if I say anything, I'm speaking on behalf of all people of color now, apparently. And also, if I say anything to like raise awareness about how something is going on that I don't like, then it's like I'm antagonistic and then isolating myself because I have no support. I'm just like that one person who's like antagonizing everyone. So that was really difficult for like 2 years, and I was kind of just trying to like ignore the fact that I was different and like not bring too much attention on myself. And I was like, okay, this is dumb. Like, and it really helped in these things was, sorry, I'm like rambling a lot, but so I organized an action camp this year with Earth First, and it's an anarchist movement, so that means that whoever organizes that action camp that year really has all the power and say of how it's going to be, different from the previous year. So the group of us that got together to organize this environmental action camp, which means basically a week in the woods, skill share, an action, talking about identity, talking about environmental or self-sufficiency and all those like earth skills and stuff like that. And I went the last few years and realized it was really intimidating, mostly white space, like dudes in camo and chainsaws. It was weird. Yeah, it was so weird. And I was like, oh my goodness. And like there was always this one panel that was on like people of color issues, like one panel on indigenous issues, and I was like, serious? It's such a formality. Like you're all woke, but like you're not doing anything. Like there's one thing to say like we're not racist, or like in environmental movements, you know, like these are radical people, and I really do like align with a lot of things they do, but like this is like you're hiding the fact that you're not really getting into these conversations. You're not letting yourself feel uncomfortable and not letting yourself get called out and not letting yourself like really talk about what race is in the environmental movement. So this year, since I was one of the organizers of the action camp and we had actually 2 other people of color in the group as well, we like stood together and we're like, all right, like our goals are to get more urban youth here. Like this is not accessible to people that are not white and come from privileged backgrounds. Like I didn't grow up camping with my family, so like I don't know how I'm gonna spend like a week outside with like no electricity, none of that stuff. Like I had to like learn that stuff later than most people. Like I never grew up doing that like a lot of white families are able to do. So like even if people are down with the cause, even if people of color like care about environmental issues, which most people, by the way, in the environmental movement just assume that people of color don't care about this as much, which is really messed up. So even if they did care, like this is not a place where they will feel comfortable to come. Not everybody has camping gear. Like not everybody can drive like 4 hours into the middle of the nowhere and like set up camp for a week. You know, like, people have jobs, supposed to take care of their families. So, and also like whose land are we on? Like we can't just like come in, like do our thing and peace out. We spent the last year organizing this action camp, like really trying to focus on the movement itself and how to bring in these principles of like environmental justice and identity to really focus our environmental work in a more holistic and open dialogue way, so that we're doing like radical environmental direct action, but we're doing it in a way that's actually fighting oppression and structural racism and addressing these things, not just like assuming you're a part of it already, like assuming you already understand. It's actually like putting those words into practice.